A Georgia high school student climbs into a gym mat and never climbs out. The sheriff says accident. The body says otherwise. And the truth? It vanished with the footage. It was an ordinary Thursday at Lowndes High School. Students shuffled through the halls, some dragging through their post-holiday slump, others gearing up for the basketball game that night. Among them was 17-year-old Kendrick Johnson, bright-eyed, athletic, and focused. He wore his signature black and red sneakers, carried no enemies, and had a habit of cutting across the school gym between classes, a shortcut that had become routine. Kendrick, KJ, to his friends, wasn't the kind of kid who blended into the background. He played multiple sports, including football and basketball, and had dreams of going pro. But he wasn't just muscle and motion, he had a quiet demeanor, a shy smile, and was deeply close with his family. His mother, Jackie, described him as a good son, a respectful young man. His father, Kenneth, spoke with pride about his son's drive and integrity. That morning, KJ attended a few classes, chatted with classmates, and seemed completely normal. Nothing in his behavior hinted at the horror that would unfold just hours later. The disappearance. When the final bell rang that afternoon, most students funneled out toward the buses or their parents' cars. KJ never made it home. By evening, his mother was worried. Kendrick always checked in, it wasn't like him to just vanish. She drove to the school, scanning the parking lot, checking with teachers and students, and finally went to the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office to report him missing. School officials initially brushed off the urgency. After all, teenagers sneak off all the time, right? But Kendrick wasn't just another moody teen. His phone wasn't answering. He had left no messages. By all accounts, he had simply ceased to exist sometime between third period and the end of the school day. What no one realized was that Kendrick's body was already lying, hidden in plain sight, inside the school building. The discovery. The next morning, January 11, 2013, two students entered the old gym to retrieve some shoes they had stored behind the bleachers. It wasn't the main gym, this one was more for overflow storage and occasional practices. A dusty place where equipment went to be forgotten. As the students neared the back corner, they were struck by a rancid chemical odor. Then they saw it, a pair of sock-covered feet sticking out of a rolled-up gym mat, standing vertically like a giant tube. The mat was 6 feet tall and tightly wound, propped upright behind the bleachers. They called for help. When staff and deputies arrived, they tilted the mat and unrolled it. Inside was the body of Kendrick Johnson, upside down, crumpled, lifeless. He was wearing the same clothes from the day before, gym shorts over sweatpants, a white t-shirt, and those same black and red sneakers. One of the shoes lay beneath him at the bottom of the mat. The other was lodged near his head. Blood streaked the inside of the mat and vomit pooled near his face. His arms were stiff at his sides. His body had been there for over 20 hours. The first theory, accident. The sheriff's office was quick to call it a tragic accident. According to their theory, Kendrick had climbed atop the rolled mats to retrieve a pair of sneakers he and other students stored inside them to avoid locker fees. He must have dropped a shoe into the center of one mat and tried to reach down for it, slipping in headfirst, unable to escape. The logic, since the mat stood vertically and was only 14 inches in diameter inside, Kendrick's broad shoulders would have pinned him, trapping him upside down. Death by positional asphyxia, a slow, silent suffocation. It was plausible for about 5 minutes. The questions start. Kendrick's parents immediately doubted the narrative. Jackie and Kenneth Johnson refused to believe their son had died that way. For starters, Kendrick was over 5 feet 10 inches tall. The mats were only 6 feet tall and stood upright. Why would a strong athlete choose to dive headfirst into a narrow tube when he could have simply tipped it over? Then there was the position of the shoes. One was beneath his feet, one near his head. If he was reaching in for a shoe, how did they end up like that? And why hadn't anyone heard anything? The gym had been active that day, kids walking in and out, teachers nearby. No struggle, no cries for help? Something didn't add up. The autopsy. An initial autopsy by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation confirmed the sheriff's ruling, accidental death by positional asphyxia. The file was closed. Case solved. But the Johnson family didn't accept it. They ordered a second independent autopsy months later, and what it revealed sparked national outrage. Kendrick's internal organs were gone. Every one of them. Brain, heart, lungs, liver replaced with newspaper and stuffing. When questioned, the GBI claimed they had released the organs to the funeral home. The funeral home claimed the organs were too decomposed to keep and had discarded them. No clear paper trail. No documentation. Just gone. The independent pathologist also found something else. blunt force trauma to the right side of Kendrick's neck, consistent with being struck, not suffocated. Suddenly, the accident theory began to fall apart. Surveillance. Missing? In an age where everything is caught on camera, the Johnson family demanded to see the school's surveillance footage. What they received was deeply suspicious. The footage from the gym showed Kendrick entering the building. Then nothing. Hours of blank space. Dozens of camera angles had missing time frames, frozen timestamps, and corrupted data. Some clips were out of order. Others appeared edited. Despite being under constant security, no footage showed Kendrick leaving the gym. No footage of anyone following him in. No clue as to what happened in that crucial window of time. Why were multiple cameras malfunctioning at the same moment? And who had access to edit them? The family believed this was not just an accident. This was a cover-up. The rumors begin. Soon, the community was divided. Some believed the Johnsons were chasing shadows, looking for justice where none was needed. Others believed something far darker was at play, involving fellow students, school staff, and local authorities. Whispers surfaced about a fight with a student-athlete. A rumor about a feud over a girl. Names started floating, including the son of an FBI agent. But without proof, it was just speculation. Still, it wouldn't be the last time those names would return to haunt the case. The Johnsons stood alone at the school fence the next day, watching students walk freely past the very gym where their son had died. Kendrick's mother whispered they think they buried him. But they buried the wrong thing. We're digging now. And what they'd uncover would shake the town and the country to its core. Lowndes High School, January 2013, weeks after the discovery. When the Johnson family was finally granted access to the school's surveillance footage, they expected answers. Instead, they received more questions than ever. The footage was supposed to show the last known moments of Kendrick Johnson's life. But as they played it frame by frame, something felt wrong. Very wrong. The timestamps jumped. The angles skipped. Entire hours were simply gone. The broken timeline. Kendrick was last seen alive on school property on January 10th, entering the old gym around 1:09 p.m. That part was visible. He walked through the hallway wearing his black and red gym shoes and carrying a folder. He appeared calm, alone. Then blackout. The feed from that specific camera froze. The next frame was hours later. Kendrick never appeared leaving the gym. Never reappeared in the hallway. It was as if he'd entered the building and been erased. The Johnsons noticed something else. While most cameras functioned at 1 frame per second, several dropped to 1 frame every 10 seconds, specifically in the crucial areas Kendrick passed through. Others cut out entirely. Some resumed recording long after Kendrick's estimated time of death. The school district claimed the system had glitches and denied any wrongdoing. But the Johnsons hired forensic video analysts who confirmed the footage had been edited. Up to an hour of footage was missing across key angles. Why? And who had access to that level of manipulation? Who had the power? In any public school, the surveillance system is tightly managed. Recordings are not easily edited, not without administrative access or law enforcement authority. The question quickly turned from what was missing to who might want it gone. Was someone trying to hide what happened in the gym that day? The Johnsons remembered early in the investigation, before Kendrick's body was even buried, how quickly authorities had closed the case. The rush to judgment, positional asphyxia, seemed almost rehearsed. Why the urgency? Unnamed suspects, but everyone in town knew. Rumors exploded through Valdosta, not just in whispered conversations but on social media, in texts, in local radio. One name kept appearing: Brian Bell, a fellow student and football star. He and Kendrick had allegedly fought months earlier, some said over a girl. Others hinted at rivalry, jealousy, something darker. Then came the second name, Brandon Bell, Brian's older brother. And behind them, their father, Rick Bell, an FBI agent. Allegedly. The implication was chilling. If Kendrick had gotten into a fight, or worse, with either Bell brother and their father had used his federal influence to cover it up, it would explain everything. The rushed autopsy, the discarded organs, the edited surveillance footage, the lack of suspects or interviews. But there was no hard proof. Just theories. The shoe theory crumbles. Let's return to the official version of events, that Kendrick had fallen into the mat while trying to retrieve a shoe. One glaring inconsistency haunted this theory: the mat's opening was only 14 inches wide. Kendrick's shoulders were broader. To fall in, he would have had to force himself, deliberately headfirst, into a vertical tube with no one around. That defies logic. Even more suspicious, the shoe Kendrick supposedly reached for? It had no blood on it, despite being directly beneath his head for hours while he bled internally and vomited. Also, if the mat was upright, why was there blood pooled at the bottom but not smeared down the sides as one would expect if he'd fallen in headfirst, alive? And finally, why did the mat stand upright at all? Students later said it had been horizontally stored that week. Someone would have had to prop it up vertically after Kendrick was already inside. Was the mat moved to hide his body? The silent school. The Johnsons tried to talk to other students, anyone who may have seen Kendrick after he entered the gym. But silence reigned. Some were afraid. Others claimed they had been told not to speak. A few outright denied seeing anything, even if surveillance showed them walking near the gym at the time. It felt like a wall had gone up in the school. A pact of silence. Why were students so scared? What were they protecting? National attention and pressure. By March 2013, the story had begun gaining national traction. News outlets like CNN and The Washington Post began asking hard questions. Why was a healthy teenager found dead in a school mat and no one was being held accountable? The Johnsons refused to let the story fade. They protested in front of the courthouse. They staged sit-ins. They printed flyers. They turned their grief into a movement. Their message was clear: my child was murdered and you're covering it up. The second autopsy bombshell. Remember that second autopsy? In addition to noting that Kendrick's internal organs were missing and replaced with newspaper, an appalling and deeply suspicious detail, the pathologist, Dr. William Anderson, concluded Kendrick had died from blunt force trauma, not suffocation. Specifically, a sudden, violent impact to the right side of the neck, likely caused by a 1 to 2 inch object, consistent with something like a weight, a pipe, or an elbow strike. He also found no signs of Kendrick struggling to breathe, contradicting the idea of a slow positional asphyxia. Now 2 theories stood side by side. One said he fell in and suffocated. The other said he was struck, killed, and placed inside the mat postmortem. And yet, authorities refused to reopen the case. The community reacts. Black residents of Valdosta saw the case as emblematic of a wider truth and justice. A black teenager dies mysteriously in a school surrounded by predominantly white faculty and students, and no one is held accountable. Rallies erupted. Banners read, "Justice for KJ." People wore t-shirts with Kendrick's face. News trucks camped outside the school gates. Even celebrities like Jesse Jackson and Benjamin Crump got involved. But every time the family pushed, the walls seemed to close in tighter. No charges. No arrests. No reopening of the case. Just silence. And edited footage. One night, Jackie Johnson stood alone in her living room, watching the blurry surveillance footage again. Frame by frame. Click. 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 At 1:09 p.m., Kendrick walks into frame. Then, nothing. Her son's final moments, scrubbed from history. Not by accident. And that's when she said it out loud, staring at the screen. They didn't just erase the footage. They erased him. And I'm bringing him back. Valdosta, Georgia, summer 2013. Kendrick Johnson's body lay buried for 5 months before his parents made the agonizing decision they would exhume him. They needed the truth. And it was no longer a question of how he died. It was now a question of what had been done to him after death and who had something to hide. Digging him up. It was early June 2013 when the earth was broken. Kendrick's casket was lifted from the soil of Sunset Hill Cemetery as his family stood in silence. Jackie Johnson could hardly breathe. "I should be bringing my son flowers, not digging him back up," she said. But she and Kenneth had made up their minds. The official autopsy, the one that claimed their son had suffocated trying to retrieve a shoe, was not enough. They needed a second opinion. A second autopsy. A second chance at justice. They had no idea what they were about to uncover. The shocking discovery. Dr. William R. Anderson, a private pathologist, began his examination of Kendrick's exhumed remains. What he found made national headlines and sparked conspiracy theories that haven't stopped since. Kendrick's internal organs were gone. All of them. Brain, heart, lungs, liver, kidneys, stomach missing. In their place, old newspaper stuffing. Yellowed, crumpled, jammed into the empty shell of a teenage boy. "This is not standard," Dr. Anderson said. "It's unheard of. It's not how you prepare a body." Jackie Johnson wept when she heard it. "They gutted my son," she said. "And no one told us." But how did this happen? Where were the organs? The Georgia Bureau of Investigation, GBI, which conducted the initial autopsy, claimed the organs were released to the funeral home. The funeral home, Harrington Funeral Home, claimed the organs were destroyed due to natural processes and discarded. Discarded. As if they were garbage. The GBI had no documentation. The funeral home had no records. No one could account for the missing organs, especially the heart, which would have been critical in proving or disproving trauma. To Kendrick's parents, this wasn't just mismanagement. It was deliberate destruction of evidence. The lawsuit begins. The Johnson family filed a wrongful death lawsuit. In it, they accused not just the school, but the Bell brothers, the sheriff's department, the coroner, and the funeral home of participating in a conspiracy to cover up a murder. The most explosive claim? That Brian Bell, a fellow student athlete, and his brother Brandon had fought with Kendrick in the gym and that Kendrick had been killed. Why would anyone cover for them? The Johnsons had an answer. Their father, Rick Bell, was an FBI agent. According to the lawsuit, Bell used his federal connections to edit the surveillance footage, pressure investigators, and manipulate the narrative. The Bells denied everything. Rick Bell insisted his sons had nothing to do with it. But public suspicion was growing. The anonymous letter. In January 2014, an anonymous letter surfaced. It was written by someone claiming to be a former friend of the Bell family. The writer stated that Brandon had confided in them that Brian had fought Kendrick in the gym, that Kendrick had been knocked unconscious or worse, and that Brandon had helped cover it up. The letter claimed they had moved Kendrick's body, propped the mat upright, and fled before anyone noticed. It was typed. No name. No verifiable details. But it was enough to prompt the U.S. Attorney's Office to open a federal investigation. For the first time in a year, the Johnsons had hope. Forensics of the mat. To understand what happened, let's look at the physical evidence again. Kendrick's body was found head down inside a vertical gym mat. The mat was 6 feet tall and had an inner diameter of 14 inches. Kendrick was 5 feet 10 inches with a shoulder span that wouldn't fit. The sheriff's theory was that Kendrick had climbed atop the mats to retrieve his shoe and fell in. But students testified those mats were stored horizontally just days before. The configuration had changed. Someone had stood that mat upright after Kendrick was already inside. There was no DNA on the shoe found beneath him. No blood, no fingerprints, and no indication that Kendrick had reached involuntarily. He didn't fall into the mat. Someone put him there. A town divided. By now, Valdosta had become a national symbol of racial injustice and internal war. On one side were those who stood with the Johnson family demanding justice, waving signs that read "murdered and covered up." On the other were those defending the Bell family and the sheriff's department, claiming the Johnsons were chasing conspiracy theories that destroyed innocent lives. The tension in Valdosta bled into every grocery store, classroom, and church. Even students at Lowndes High said the school felt like a powder keg. Teachers avoided mentioning Kendrick, but his classmates hadn't forgotten. Some still wore shirts with his face on them. Others whispered about what they saw and what they didn't. Kendrick's journal. Then came another bombshell. The Johnsons released pages from Kendrick's private notebook, which they found after his death. Among the pages were writings about feeling watched, being followed, and not trusting certain people at school. One entry read, "They think I'm weak, but I see everything, even when they smile." Had Kendrick feared for his life? Had he confided in someone? Was his death not a random accident, but the final act in a slow-burning feud? The funeral home told the Johnsons to move on. The sheriff told them to stop stirring up trouble. The town told them to grieve quietly. But Jackie Johnson stood before the cameras and said, "They can take his organs. They can take the footage. But they can't take our fight. Kendrick's coming back with the truth." And somewhere in that school, someone still knew what really happened in that gym. Valdosta, Georgia, 2014. By the time the Johnsons publicly named Brian and Brandon Bell as suspects in their son's death, the small town of Valdosta was already choking on rumors. Brian Bell, a talented linebacker at Lowndes High, had once been friends with Kendrick Johnson. They played sports together, shared classes, and even ran in similar social circles. But something had changed in the year before Kendrick's death. There were whispers of a fight. A girl. Jealousy. Brandon Bell, Brian's older brother, was a quiet presence, older, already graduated. He worked on campus as a student aide the day Kendrick vanished. And then there was Rick Bell, their father, an FBI agent with reach, with connections. To some, it felt like an open and shut theory. A fight, a fatal blow, a family cover-up. But theories aren't proof. And in the court of law and public opinion, evidence is everything. A shattered friendship. Brian and Kendrick had been close once. Classmates recalled their banter in gym class, their shared competitive streak on the field. But in late 2012, something cracked. Some say it started over a girl one Kendrick had talked to, one Brian claimed as his own. Others say it was nothing more than ego, two alpha personalities clashing in a tight space. Whatever the trigger, witnesses claimed a hallway fight broke out months before Kendrick's death. Brian and Kendrick exchanged punches. School staff separated them. No charges. No suspension. But bad blood remained. Brandon's timeline. Brandon Bell wasn't a student anymore. But on January 10, 2013, the day Kendrick disappeared, he was on campus as part of a work-study program. He was allegedly present during the window of time Kendrick was last seen. Brandon claimed he was in another part of the building, but surveillance footage was missing. Sign-in logs were incomplete, and after Kendrick's body was found, Brandon abruptly left town, flying to California that same day. Coincidence? The Johnsons didn't think so. What the Bells said. In 2014, as pressure mounted, Brian Bell broke his silence on camera. "I didn't have anything to do with Kendrick's death. We weren't enemies. We just weren't close anymore." He called the accusations devastating, claiming they'd ruined his life. College recruiters pulled offers. Strangers harassed his family. Death threats flooded their inboxes. Brian's parents stood by him. His coaches vouched for him. He was described as respectful, ambitious, not violent. The Bells said the Johnsons were desperate, that they were fabricating a villain to cope with their grief. But the Johnsons weren't interested in opinions. They wanted facts. The phone confiscation. In 2015, during the federal investigation, Brian Bell's phone was confiscated by the FBI. His emails, texts, GPS data, and social media history were reviewed. The goal, to confirm his location and activities at the time of Kendrick's death. But the results were never made public. The case stalled. The data, like the footage, seemed to vanish into a bureaucratic void. The Johnsons feared the worst, that the investigation was being slow-walked, or worse, buried. The $100 million lawsuit. With no arrests and no formal charges, the Johnson family took drastic action. In 2015, they filed a $100 million wrongful death lawsuit, naming 38 individuals and organizations, including Brian and Brandon Bell, Rick Bell, the Lowndes County School System, the Sheriff's Department, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and several classmates and staff members. They accused them of conspiracy, obstruction, negligence, and murder cover-up. But almost immediately, the case faced legal fire. The judge ordered the Johnsons to narrow the claims, citing lack of evidence for several of the named individuals. Eventually, the case was dropped, not because it was disproven, but because the Johnsons couldn't access the evidence they needed. They were locked out of the very truth they were trying to reveal. Surveillance silence. Key questions still lingered around the surveillance footage. Why were multiple cameras malfunctioning during Kendrick's final movements? Why were the gaps not logged or explained? And if Brian or Brandon were in the gym, why didn't the footage show it? The school maintained the same position, technical glitches. But private forensic analysts reviewing the footage confirmed again in 2015. There are signs of editing. Missing frames. Spliced sequences. It does not appear to be raw footage. Still, no one was held accountable. No technician fired. No explanation offered. The town turns cold. By now, Valdosta was boiling beneath the surface of politeness. You could feel it in the grocery store, at the gas station, in hushed conversations at football games. Some thought the Johnsons were fighting for justice. Others believed they were destroying reputations. Kids who had once worn "Justice for KJ" shirts now kept their heads down. Teachers stopped mentioning Kendrick in class. It became dangerous to pick a side. But the Johnsons never stopped. A mother's rage. Jackie Johnson sat before Congress in 2015, testifying with tears and steel in her voice. "My son didn't climb into that mat. My son was put there. He was killed. And I will not stop until the people who did it and the people who hid it are held accountable." The room was silent. But outside that hearing, nothing changed. The federal investigation dragged on. The lawsuit stalled. The footage remained a chopped-up puzzle. And yet, a quiet fear began to spread among those close to the case. What if the Bells had nothing to do with it? What if Kendrick's death wasn't just covered up but wasn't what anyone thought it was at all? And then, a third autopsy would change everything. Valdosta, Georgia, 2016. By 2016, the case of Kendrick Johnson had become a national puzzle, a true crime enigma where every answer raised two more questions. Theories clashed. Families were ruined. But the most horrifying piece of the mystery wasn't just what happened to Kendrick. It was that 3 separate autopsies, each conducted by a different authority, came back with different causes of death. The first autopsy, official version. Date, January 2013. Conducted by Georgia Bureau of Investigation, GBI. Conclusion: accidental positional asphyxia. According to this first report, Kendrick fell into an upright gym mat while trying to retrieve a shoe. Stuck head down, he slowly suffocated. The GBI maintained that there were no signs of trauma, no wounds, no foul play. His death was a freak accident. But they had a problem. The handling of Kendrick's body was sloppy at best and possibly criminal at worst. The GBI had supposedly sent Kendrick's organs to the funeral home. The funeral home claimed the organs had liquefied and were discarded. There were no records, no documentation, no chain of custody. And worse, the body had not been properly preserved. By the time Kendrick was buried, he was a shell. A teenager stuffed with newspaper. The second autopsy, a new truth. Date: June 2013, after exhumation. Conducted by Dr. William Anderson, independent pathologist. Conclusion: death by blunt force trauma to the neck. This autopsy turned the case upside down. Dr. Anderson stated clearly, Kendrick's body showed signs of being struck with a 1 to 2 inch object near the right jaw and neck, an impact forceful enough to be fatal. This was not an accident. This was a homicide. Furthermore, Dr. Anderson found no signs of suffocation, no congestion in the lungs, no signs of struggle inside the mat, no abrasions consistent with a desperate attempt to escape. He publicly stated, "The injuries are consistent with being hit. There is no evidence of accidental suffocation." Suddenly, the shoe theory fell apart. And yet, no arrests, no reopened investigation, only silence. The third autopsy, the final nail? In 2021, 8 years after Kendrick's death, the Johnson family made the heart-wrenching decision to exhume Kendrick a second time for a third autopsy. The case had gone cold again. Lawsuits had failed. And the Johnsons were determined to document everything, once and for all. Date: March 2021. Conducted by Dr. Martina L. Auth, independent forensic pathologist. Conclusion: unexplained, possibly inflicted blunt trauma. This third autopsy supported Dr. Anderson's conclusions. Blunt trauma was present. But this time it went further. The damage to Kendrick's carotid artery and cervical spine suggested an intentional, targeted strike, not a fall and not a random accident. Dr. Auth stated in her report, "The injuries are inconsistent with accidental trauma. The pattern is consistent with inflicted injuries." The Johnsons held a press conference immediately after. Jackie Johnson said, "3 autopsies. 3 versions, but only one truth. My son was murdered, and they've buried the truth with him twice. Why 3 autopsies didn't bring justice?" Despite mounting forensic evidence, the legal system remained motionless. Each time the Johnsons presented new findings, officials cited a lack of prosecutable evidence. No suspects formally charged. No eyewitnesses. Surveillance footage edited or missing. Chain of custody for Kendrick's body and organs broken. Even the U.S. Department of Justice eventually closed its case in 2016, stating there wasn't enough proof to bring federal charges. They did not declare it an accident. They simply said they could not prove who had killed Kendrick or how. The Johnsons were devastated. The missing timeline. Here's what is known with near certainty. 12:59 p.m. Kendrick is seen entering the old gym. 1:09 p.m. he is last seen walking toward the mats. 1:30 to 4 p.m. multiple students pass through the gym. Kendrick is not seen again. Next day, 10:30 a.m., his body is found. Between 1:10 and 1:30 p.m., something happened inside the gym, something no camera recorded. Something no student reported. Something someone erased. They know what they did. Frustrated and out of legal options, the Johnsons began publishing names. On flyers, social media, and protest posters, they openly accused the Bell brothers, Brian and Brandon, and their father of orchestrating Kendrick's death and its cover-up. They weren't quiet about it. They stood outside the courthouse, shouting names into megaphones. They confronted politicians. They posted surveillance screenshots online. They were sued for defamation multiple times, and they didn't care. Jackie Johnson told reporters, "Sue me all you want. My son's still dead, and someone in that school knows why." Other theories emerge. Not everyone agreed with the Bell theory. Alternate theories began to surface. That Kendrick had gotten into a fight with a different student, not the Bells. That a staff member was involved, possibly someone in security. That Kendrick had seen something, a drug exchange, abuse, or secret, and was silenced. That the motive wasn't personal, it was institutional. Even the possibility of ritualistic or targeted violence was whispered in fringe forums. But without new witnesses, untampered video, or cooperative officials, all theories were speculation. The body told the story, but no one listened. By 2021, Kendrick had been buried, exhumed, autopsied, and reburied 3 times. Each time, the findings screamed the same thing. This was no accident, but justice never came. No arrests, no grand jury, no apology. Just the Johnsons screaming into the void, holding up autopsy photos, begging someone to listen. After the 3rd autopsy, Jackie Johnson placed Kendrick's school ID on her mantle beside a framed photo. She stared at it and whispered, "They left you with no voice, but your bones still speak, and I'm still listening." And far away, somewhere in Valdosta, the people who know the truth still walk free. Valdosta, Georgia, 2017. The human eye blinks every few seconds. But the eyes of Lowndes High, the security cameras, blinked at all the wrong moments. And those blinks may have cost Kendrick Johnson his justice. The Johnson family believed the truth was caught on camera and then deleted. Not lost. Not glitched. Erased. This part of the story dives into the digital blackouts, the missing minutes, and the people with the power to make video vanish. A school with eyes everywhere. Lowndes High School had over 35 surveillance cameras positioned in hallways, gyms, and common areas. The old gym, where Kendrick was found, had 4. Each camera was motion-activated and logged footage in 1-second intervals. If anything moved, it recorded. Simple, right? Except it didn't. When the Johnsons finally got access to the footage after public pressure and media coverage, they noticed something chilling. Kendrick is seen walking into the gym at 1:09 p.m. After that, nothing. The next frame from that same camera isn't until after 3 p.m. 2 full hours missing. From a motion-activated camera. In a public school. In a case involving a dead student. What the analysts found. The Johnsons hired a team of forensic video analysts to go through the footage frame by frame. What they found confirmed the family's worst fears. 1. Footage was out of sync across multiple cameras. 2. Timestamps jumped backwards and forwards, in some cases by several minutes. 3. Entire blocks of time were missing from all 4 cameras in the gym. 4. In some spots, students would appear mid-step as if frames had been removed. One particularly damning segment showed a student entering the gym and disappearing for 15 minutes only to reappear instantly as if those 900 seconds never existed. How does time disappear in a school? Someone had to access, select, edit, and export specific footage. That requires admin privileges and a motive. Who had access? Only a small number of people had access to the school's surveillance system. The IT administrator, the assistant principal, the school resource officer, a sheriff's deputy. Select law enforcement officials. The sheriff's office was the first to collect and review the footage long before the Johnsons ever saw it. So when it was finally handed over, the question was no longer what was missing, but who had already watched what Kendrick's final moments looked like before erasing them. The FBI agent connection. The Bell's father, Rick Bell, was a known FBI agent. The Johnsons believed he used his influence to orchestrate a cover-up, including manipulating the footage. They pointed to the speed at which the case was closed, the missing video, and the lack of formal interviews with key suspects as evidence of foul play. Rick Bell denied involvement. So did the FBI. No investigation was opened into possible evidence tampering. But many in the public couldn't ignore one crucial detail. Footage from only the old gym was missing or corrupted. Every other hallway, every other entrance, every classroom? Fine. Only the place Kendrick died and the time he died had been digitally scrambled. The girl in the hallway. At 1:27 p.m., one camera showed a girl walking down the hallway adjacent to the gym. She looked toward the gym doors, paused, then walked away quickly. She was never publicly identified, but the Johnsons wanted her found. Was she a witness? Did she hear something? Did she see who went into the gym or came out? Her identity was never confirmed. Her statement, if it was ever taken, was never released. Just another ghost in the footage. The audio problem. None of the security footage had sound. Not a single microphone was active. That meant if Kendrick had screamed, called for help, or even if someone threatened him, there would be no record. And it wasn't a coincidence. The school's surveillance system was capable of audio recording, but audio was disabled across all feeds. Why? The school never explained. The mat's movement. In one fragment of the video recovered after extensive digital analysis, Kendrick is seen walking past the rolled-up mats. In the background, the mats are horizontally stacked. When Kendrick's body was found the next day, the mat he was inside was vertical. Someone had moved it. There is no video of the mat being turned. No footage of who did it. No timestamps to prove when it happened. Another piece of evidence gone. Digital sabotage? An IT expert interviewed anonymously in 2016 claimed the school's footage showed signs of manual editing. Frame splicing, resolution drops, missing keyframes, overwritten timestamps. This wasn't a software error. It was intentional, but without a court order and chain of custody, proving that in court was nearly impossible. And no judge had yet approved a forensic subpoena of the original surveillance server. Instead, the Johnsons were left with a copy of a copy of a copy, an edited version that no longer told the truth. By now, the case wasn't just a tragedy. It was a locked box. One someone had the key to, and someone else had thrown it into the ocean. Jackie Johnson stared at the glitching footage again. The moment Kendrick walked past the mats, the place he vanished, she whispered to herself. They didn't just delete the footage. They deleted the moment he was still alive. But what they didn't know was that a new investigator had just taken interest, and he was about to blow the case wide open. Georgia, 2018. By now, the Kendrick Johnson case had become a national ghost story, a modern Southern mystery where the dead boy's name echoed louder than any verdict ever would. But while officials closed their folders and news cameras dimmed, one man refused to let it die. He was quiet, relentless, and not afraid of what or who he might uncover. His name was Marcus Coleman, and he didn't wear a badge. He wasn't with the FBI. He wasn't even law enforcement. He was an activist. And in this case, that made him dangerous. A civilian with a mission. Marcus Coleman had seen injustice before. He'd worked on cases of racial profiling, police misconduct, and wrongful deaths across the South. But something about Kendrick Johnson's case hit differently. The silence, the cover-up, the emptiness in the surveillance footage. He wasn't a detective, but he thought like one, and he had one major advantage. He didn't answer to anyone. Rebuilding the timeline, Coleman started where everyone else had failed, the timeline. He built a master spreadsheet, minute by minute, of Kendrick's known movements based on class schedules, eyewitnesses, camera footage, and school logs. Then he overlaid the edited surveillance footage onto the timeline. The holes lit up like shotgun blasts. 23 distinct blackout windows just minutes long in key locations. Someone hadn't just deleted random chunks. They had surgically removed moments that could have identified. Who entered the gym? Who exited? Who may have been near the mats at the right moment? Who had motive to lie later? The missing maintenance worker. In his research, Coleman came across a name, a janitor who was reportedly working in the old gym during the hour Kendrick vanished. He wasn't mentioned in any police report. He hadn't been interviewed publicly. And, most alarmingly, he had left his job shortly after Kendrick's death. Coleman tracked him down in a neighboring county. The man agreed to speak off the record. I saw Kendrick go in. I didn't see him come out. That's all I'll say. Why hadn't law enforcement included that in their investigation? Was he afraid? Was he warned? Coleman noted it down, then moved on. The whistleblower. Months later, in 2019, Coleman received an anonymous tip, a USB flash drive left in his mailbox. No return address. No note. Just a label. Lounge CM feed, raw backup January 10th, 13. He played it on an air-gapped laptop. What he saw next made his blood run cold. It was surveillance footage identical to what the Johnsons had been given, except for one difference. A blurred figure walking out of the old gym at 1:28 p.m. Tall, athletic build, white shirt, backpack, and the camera? Timestamped exactly during the window that the official footage had claimed no movement detected. Whoever it was, they had been erased in the official version. Coleman didn't release the footage immediately. He needed to confirm its authenticity. He hired an independent video forensic lab to analyze frame data and verify timestamps. Their verdict: this is raw system output, not edited. The missing footage was never lost. It was hidden. Pressure builds again. Armed with this discovery, Coleman and the Johnson family held a public press conference in early 2020. Jackie Johnson stood beside Coleman and raised the flash drive in the air. They said they gave us all the footage. They lied, and we can prove it. National news picked it up again. The case trended on Twitter. Celebrities tweeted #JusticeForKJ. And under mounting pressure, Lowndes County reopened the case. The sheriff's office responds. Sheriff Ashley Polk, who had previously dismissed the case as settled, now issued a statement. We are requesting all files related to Kendrick Johnson's death. If there was wrongdoing, we will expose it. But few trusted Polk. After all, his office had been in charge of the original investigation. Would they investigate themselves honestly? Coleman didn't think so, so he kept digging faster than ever. The letters. Around this time, Coleman and the Johnsons received 2 anonymous letters. The first was typed. It read, "The one you're looking for doesn't live here anymore. He moved. He knows he's being watched. He was there that day. You'll find him if you follow the emails." No name, just a P.O. box from northern Florida. The second was handwritten, childlike. He was put in the mat after, not before. They moved it. Watch the stairs. It made little sense at first, until Coleman reviewed the raw backup footage again frame by frame. In one clip, a staircase near the gym showed a figure carrying something heavy covered by a black cloth. The timestamp? 1:17 p.m. The image was grainy. The figure was unidentifiable. But the cloth, it had white stripes. Kendrick's hoodie had white stripes. Coleman stared at the paused frame. He called Jackie Johnson and said, "I think I know how they moved him. I think I know who. And I'm going to find proof." And somewhere out there, the man in the white shirt and backpack was watching, waiting, hoping time would forget. But time wasn't done with him yet. Valdosta, Georgia, 2020. By now, Kendrick Johnson's name had become legendary in Valdosta. His face stared back from murals, t-shirts, and protest signs. But in the very town where he had lived and died, silence ruled. This was a town that refused to talk even when people knew something, especially when they knew something. And what Marcus Coleman began to uncover wasn't just a story of a covered-up death. It was a story of a community trained to stay quiet, no matter how loud the screams beneath the surface. Walls of silence. Coleman walked the streets near Lowndes High in early 2020, knocking on doors, revisiting old witnesses, checking yearbooks, class rosters, hallway logs. Over and over, he heard the same things. "I don't remember. I wasn't there. I don't want trouble." Some students, now in their mid-20s, refused to even acknowledge Kendrick's name. One woman who worked near the school whispered through a screen door, "You're not the first one to come looking. But the ones who talked don't live here anymore." When Coleman asked if that was by choice, she said nothing. "Just shut the door." The scared teacher. One lead pointed Coleman to a former gym teacher known to be present during the day Kendrick vanished. The teacher had since retired and moved 2 counties away. After weeks of pressure, she agreed to meet, but not in public. Inside a diner booth with drawn blinds, she confessed. "Something happened that day. You could feel it. But the school told us to stick to the script. It was a freak accident. Nothing more. That's what they said." She claimed she saw 2 students leaving the gym fast, looking shaken, but no one ever asked her for a statement. She gave Marcus their names. Both had since moved out of state. One of them? A former friend of Brandon Bell. The paranoia runs deep. Even people tangentially connected to the Johnson case had stories. A janitor who claimed his phone was confiscated after Kendrick's death and never returned. A student who said they were told not to wear Justice for KJ shirts at school or risk detention. A staff member who received a visit from law enforcement after she posted a cryptic Facebook status, "You can't erase every tape." The unspoken message in Valdosta was clear. If you talk, you'll regret it. Coleman's break-in. In April 2020, Marcus returned to Valdosta for one last sweep of the school's perimeter. One night, as he filmed B-roll footage outside the campus for an upcoming documentary, he noticed a light on inside the old gym. The school was supposed to be locked. As he approached, the light snapped off. The door was locked. No alarms. No movement. But taped to the inside of the glass window, almost as if waiting for someone, was a piece of paper. It read, "The mat was moved. Twice. Look at the first cut." Coleman froze. Was it a hoax? A trap? Or was someone finally trying to speak from behind a wall of fear? The first cut. That note sent Coleman back to the raw backup footage. He rewatched the first camera angle, the very first clip that showed Kendrick walking into the gym. There it was. A brief flicker just before Kendrick entered the frame. One frame out of place. One moment not blacked out but spliced. It had been so subtle no one noticed before. In it, a blurred figure is seen standing near the mat before Kendrick enters the gym. The mat was already vertical, meaning Kendrick didn't climb in on his own. It had already been prepared, and someone had already been waiting. No justice without witnesses. By now, Coleman had compiled 3 autopsies, missing surveillance footage, whistleblower letters, anonymous footage, dozens of silenced staff and students, but still no charges. Because in America, you don't get justice from whispers. You get it from witnesses willing to speak, and Valdosta had run out of them. A town divided by grief, Even within Valdosta's Black community, the Johnson case was complicated. Some supported the family unconditionally. Others felt exhausted, frustrated, or even afraid that the constant tension would lead to violence. A church leader told a local radio show, "We want justice, but we also want peace. And in this town, sometimes you can't have both." But Jackie Johnson wasn't looking for peace. She was looking for the truth, and she was willing to burn every bridge in Valdosta to get it. Late one night, Coleman received a call from an unlisted number. The voice was low, muffled. "Male, you're not wrong, but you're looking in the wrong direction." The mat was a second thought. The motive wasn't personal. It was institutional. Click. No name. No callback. Just that. Suddenly, Coleman realized. Maybe this wasn't just about two students. Maybe Kendrick had seen something. And maybe he wasn't the first to pay for it. Valdosta, Georgia, 2021. For 8 years, everyone asked how Kendrick Johnson died. Few dared ask why. The popular theory said it was a teenage fight. A punch. A cover-up. Simple. Personal. Emotional. But what if that was a smokescreen? In late 2021, Marcus Coleman found himself chasing a lead that took the case in a new, more terrifying direction, one that suggested Kendrick's death wasn't just about revenge or rivalry, but about a secret he was never supposed to know. A stranger's warning. After the anonymous call claiming the motive was institutional, Coleman began re-examining everything. Why would someone kill Kendrick Johnson? To silence him? Yes. But from what? He started reviewing Kendrick's school records, peer relationships, and even his digital footprint, email, social accounts, message boards. Most had been scrubbed or inactive. But one stood out. An encrypted email account registered to Kendrick unknown to his parents. It had only one visible message left in the inbox. A subject line, "They're using the storage room." No body. No sender. Just that. The timestamp? 3 days before Kendrick died. The storage room. Lowndes High had several old supply rooms, but one was directly connected to the old gym through a maintenance hallway rarely used by students. Coleman went back to blueprints. Found a janitor's closet with a false wall, long since unused. He managed to find a former security guard who admitted, anonymously, that certain staff had access codes to restricted spaces. When asked what was stored in that room, the guard just said, "Not what you'd expect in a school." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. The package that arrived too late. In January 2022, the Johnson family received an unmarked envelope in their mailbox. Inside was a printed photo. Blurry. Taken from what looked like a school hallway camera. Kendrick stood near a doorway, speaking with an adult male, not in a school uniform. The man's face was obscured, deliberately blacked out with marker. Attached was a sticky note. "This is the day before." He knew. He asked the wrong question. No return address. No fingerprints. Whoever sent it didn't want to be thanked. They just wanted the truth out. Kendrick the quiet watcher. Those close to Kendrick said he was observant, the kind of kid who noticed things others ignored. He wasn't loud, but he was perceptive. A classmate came forward anonymously in 2022 and said, "He said something weird to me one day. He said, 'You ever seen people go into the gym and not come out the same?' I thought he meant tired from working out. But now," she trailed off. Coleman leaned in. What if Kendrick had witnessed something in that gym or in the rooms nearby? Something he wasn't meant to see. Something that couldn't be explained in court. Underground whispers. Coleman followed whispers into darker corners of town, fringe message boards, anonymous tips, even rumors from other schools in Georgia. He uncovered a pattern. Students disappearing for a few days, returning distant. Whispers of hazing rituals, off-books meetings. Security drills that never showed up on official records. Coaches or staff who vanished quietly without fanfare. Some even said recruiters came to Lowndes for more than just football prospects. Was it trafficking? An underground network? Abuse? It sounded outrageous. Until he cross-referenced student transfer requests filed immediately after Kendrick's death. 5 students left within 2 weeks. All from the same class rotation. None ever spoke publicly. A history of cover UPS? Coleman reviewed past school incidents, digging up hidden headlines. 2008, student found unconscious in the school lot. No charges filed. 2010, assault reported in locker room. Case dropped. 2012, 2 girls claimed a teacher pressured them in exchange for grades. Reassigned quietly. Each incident buried. Each investigator discouraged. This wasn't just about Kendrick anymore. It was about a pattern of silence. A system that protected itself. The sheriff's strange statement. In mid-2022, Sheriff Ashley Polk made a bizarre public statement claiming that Kendrick Johnson's death was a terrible accident that has been turned into a business. He accused the family of profiting off the case. He dismissed all theories of murder. He even released his own 16-page report claiming there was no cover-up. Coleman read the report, noted what was missing. No mention of the spliced footage. No mention of the anonymous whistleblowers. No mention of the student withdrawals. No mention of the third autopsy's conclusion. He realized something else. This wasn't just neglect. It was protection of something bigger than 2 boys and a gym mat. That night, Coleman walked past the gates of Lowndes High, now fenced off for weekend maintenance. He stared at the old gym. He knew Kendrick had walked into that building and never walked out, but someone else had, and they had been protected ever since. A ghost in a white shirt and backpack, a janitor who saw nothing, a surveillance feed with precise cuts, a motive too dangerous to say aloud. The mat wasn't the crime. It was the cleanup. And the real story? Still buried beneath layers no autopsy could touch. Valdosta, Georgia, present day. Kendrick Johnson has been dead for over a decade. His case has been closed, reopened, closed again. His body exhumed twice. His name spoken from courthouses to Congress. And still, no one has ever been arrested. But that doesn't mean his story is over. Because some people refuse to let the dead stay buried. Especially when the dead are buried with secrets. The final reopening. In 2021, under mounting public pressure and media resurgence, Sheriff Ashley Polk reopened the Kendrick Johnson case for a 3rd time. He collected over 17 boxes of evidence, hundreds of hours of footage, and over 50 interviews. After months of investigation, Polk publicly declared, "There is nothing criminal here. Kendrick's death was a tragic accident and people need to stop spreading lies." He called the Johnsons' claims fiction. He dismissed the 3rd autopsy. He denied any cover-up. Then he released a self-authored report filled with defensive language, incomplete timelines, and zero mention of the surveillance blackouts or missing organs. The Johnsons called it what it was, a slap in the face. The family that refused to stop. Jackie and Kenneth Johnson never stopped marching. Never stopped holding signs. Never stopped printing Kendrick's face on t-shirts and posters and flyers. Every year, on January 11th, the day Kendrick's body was discovered, they host a candlelight vigil outside Lowndes High School. They stand in silence for 90 seconds. 1 second for each minute that Kendrick spent dying inside that gym mat. At one vigil, Jackie spoke. "You can kill a boy. You can hide a body. You can silence cameras. But you can't erase the truth forever." Marcus Coleman's archive. By 2023, Marcus Coleman had assembled a full digital archive of the Kendrick Johnson case, a multi-terabyte dossier of footage, statements, medical files, photographs, and whistleblower letters. He released it as the KJ Files, an open-source archive for journalists, researchers, and activists. One entry stood out. Folder name, known but protected. Inside, transcripts of interviews never submitted to court. Statements from staff who were advised not to speak. 3 students' emails from 2013, warning appear. "Don't say anything. They're watching Kendrick. He's asking too much." Coleman didn't care if it ever made it into court. He just wanted people to know. The no justice law. In 2024, the Johnson family helped introduce state legislation unofficially known as the Kendrick Law, requiring all Georgia schools to maintain unaltered, time-stamped surveillance backups with third-party oversight. It didn't pass. Too expensive. Too complicated. Too dangerous? But the movement gained traction. By 2025, 4 other states adopted similar bills unofficially dedicated to Kendrick. The boy they tried to erase was now changing the system that failed him. So what really happened? No one knows exactly what happened in that gym. But the facts that remain unexplainable speak louder than any official report. Kendrick's body was found in a vertical mat with no logical reason for him to have climbed in. His organs were missing, replaced with newspaper, and no one took responsibility. Surveillance footage during the exact time frame of his disappearance was deleted, spliced, and unrecoverable. A 3rd autopsy declared death by blunt force trauma. Witnesses left town. Staff members refused to speak, and no suspects were ever questioned under oath. Was it a fight? A mistake turned cover-up? Or something darker, something systemic? You decide. Kendrick Johnson's gravestone doesn't say how he died, but it says how he lived. Born October 10, 1995. Gone too soon, January 10, 2013. A loving son, brother, friend? the truth will rise. And even in a world built to suppress it, the truth always rises. It rises in the cracks of deleted files, in the silence of frightened teachers, in the weight of a mother's stare, in the persistence of strangers who never knew him but refused to forget him. Kendrick Johnson may have been buried twice, but his story? Never.